As a mother of 2 black boys and 2 black girls, I realize that I have to advocate on their behalf.
Hey everybody, welcome to MOBBin in Your City. I am your host, Nicki Micheaux, and we're coming at you from my living room in Los Angeles. I want to tell you a little bit about MOBBUnited. We were started 4 years ago in response to the killing of Black men and boys by police brutality. We want to be a resource and a place of guidance and a voice for mothers who have lost their children to police brutality. We also want to be a support system for moms who have to navigate these systems with their Black child and helping them to understand how we can do better by our children, how we can advocate for policy change for our children, and how we can support each other as moms as we go through this day by day. So I'm excited because every week we're going to come to you with a different mom from MOBBUnited, a different chapter leader in a different city, telling you a little bit about what they're doing on the front lines for change and for support for our boys. Our new talk show is a way for you to get to know us, learn about us, and also join with us in this fight for change. So let's get started with the show. This week we have Kim Alexander coming back to us from Houston, Texas. She is the chapter leader out there. Kim, hi, how you doing?
Hey, Nikki, how are you?
I'm really good. I am so excited to have you back on the show. We got to talk a little bit last time. People got to meet you for the first time, but they don't know your story. So without further ado, Kim, tell us a little bit about you and your son and what made you get involved with MOBBUnited.
Nikki, I just want to go back just even a little bit further than that because I'm the chapter leader in Texas, but I'm originally from Harlem, New York, and I just need to big up New York for a moment. But I want to put a few things into perspective from where I come from. Yeah. So I have 2 sons. Their ages are 21 and 14, and I was a really young mom. So, you know, I have 4 children in total, 26, 21, 19 and 14, 2 boys, 2 girls. And so my first son was born when I was 20 years old. Just growing up in the environment that I was in, I grew up in the projects in Harlem. I grew up, to put it into perspective, I grew up 3 blocks from where the Central Park jogger case happened. Mm-hmm. And so I knew some of those boys who were picked up during that time. And I watched from the age of 12, I was 12 when it happened. And I watched that neighborhood evolve. I watched my neighborhood evolve. And the things that happened with the police officers and what they did to then house us. And I use those words specifically because we grew up in these buildings that were 20 stories high with 20, 25 apartments on each floor. And we were basically herded. And you know, when the Central Park jogger case happened and started to unfold, they started putting up gates in my neighborhood. So there was
locking you in
ways you could walk, and there were areas you couldn't go. And I grew up in a time in Harlem where it was the war on drugs and all of those kinds of things that were happening. And we didn't know to be upset. We didn't know that it wasn't okay for a police officer to stop me and take a Polaroid picture of me. We didn't know it wasn't okay for a police officer to force us to show ID to go to the home that we lived in. My grandparents occupied an apartment in these buildings for 56 years, and we were regularly harassed, documented by police officers in our neighborhoods. I wanted to bring that up because I want the community that's hearing this to understand that I come from the same kinds of places that some of these moms come from. I had to learn. I'm a regular person. And so I first had to learn to be upset about it, because if that's your normal day to day, then institutional racism is working, right? It's working when you don't even know to be upset.
Girl, you tapped on something that is, because that type of messaging, it gets into the psyche. It gets into the psyche, and you start to think, oh, this, even though the war on drugs was really just a war on black and brown people, you know, from the very beginning. Not to digress too far into that, I'm glad you shared that, because a lot of people might see you today, you know, very accomplished, chapter lead, whoop-de-woo. you know, and I think people should know where you come from and know how you built yourself to this point. I think that's amazing.
It took a lot of learning. And I think that we use the verbiage a lot. Well, I'm woke. I'm woke. And what does that mean to be woke? But then when you're woke, what do you do with that?
That's exactly it, because right now people are, a new generation is woke. You know, so many people are woke, and I think we got to talk about where do you put that, and that's exactly what MOBBUnited is for. So you see it, the blinders have come off, and you see it. And MOBBUnited was a place for you and a place for many other people to come and have a voice. You know, how we can move this forward. So, talk to me about.
I moved my outrage to action.
So tell me what it was that woke you up about your son.
So my son was 9. He was in the 4th grade. It was towards the end of the school year. So he was about a month shy of turning 10. He's special needs, and he has a condition called eosinophilic esophagitis. What that means is that he has extreme food allergies. My son is only permitted to eat 10 foods in life. We needed a way to get him calories so that he could grow and he could be healthier. That was very necessary, but was very scary for a 9-year-old. And so...
And for mommy.
Absolutely. His attitude was, if I can't eat it, I'm gonna cook it. And he started experimenting with food. So one day he decided that he wanted to do a challenge that he had seen on one of these shows. And he took a Ziploc bag full of oregano to school with him, and an adult saw it. The adult reported him to the building principal, and the building principal then called the police on my son. Now, my son was about 3'8", and he was 47 pounds at this time. Showed up at his school with 3 troopers, 2 police dogs, and the principal.
Now, this is a 4th grader. This is a 4th grader.
He's a 4th grader. It took 72 hours before any official called me in this situation. They told my son, "You're lucky you're not 10, or you would be in handcuffs." And that was when I found out that the age of arrest in Texas is 10 years old. So one thing that's really important to know about Texas is Texas has an independent school district. And what that means is that each city or specific area is governed by the board policy for that specific area. So I can drive 30 minutes and the law is different.
Right. You know, you bring up an interesting point, because each district is different, which is why we need moms on the ground like you who are fighting for change all across this country, because it's not one federal law. It's each district has its own approach. And if we're not on the ground advocating for change, that this is not acceptable, we can't, what one neighborhood might experience one thing, and then, like you say, 30 miles up the road, experience something completely different. And this is why we need so many moms like you out there going to these school board meetings, speaking up, saying this is an injustice, this is an attack on our communities. So tell me a little bit about what hats do you wear in Mob? Like, I know that you are on you run the special needs committee.
Yeah, so when I first joined Mob, I very quickly segued to what was then the Health and Wellness Committee. And as a subset of that was the Special Needs Committee. And what we found is that in the group, there are many moms who have children who have special needs. And I want to define special needs as it relates to MOBBUnited. Special needs does not specifically speak to a deficit. It is anything special about your child. So if your child is gifted, if your child has a deficit, if your child is autistic, if your child is blind, mobility impaired, it's anything that is special about your child. Because what we also find is that the talents, gifts that our children have, that our Black and brown boys have, are not capitalized on. They are not engaged. They are not cultivated in our sons. I think the significant part of what's happening right now in the city and what's worth talking about from a special needs perspective is that we have the option of allowing our children to do online learning. And I can give a couple of key points on how you want to make those decisions. You know, one of the ways you want to make that decision is whether or not you have people who are susceptible in your house or your child themselves are in a position where they may have detrimental effects from catching COVID. So we're at the point where, just in general, the data that we have on children doesn't say that they are affected or infected in the same way that adults are. That's what we have right now. We know that we have the COVID variation for kids, and we've had a few children who have died from it, but the numbers in terms of adult versus child are very different. We also know that children are carriers. So for instance, in my household, I have an immunocompromised child and I have 3 typical children. So if those children were going to school, but AJ was staying home, do I want to put him in a position where those children then are potentially bringing something back to him? But at some point, school will need to reopen, and as long as the proper precautions are being made and social distancing is being followed, then the likelihood that children will be greatly affected is a little bit less than it is for adults. Then you have to consider, do you have pregnant people in your household? Do you have someone who has a comorbidity in your household? Do you have someone who is immunocompromised in your household? So it's almost like a decision tree. So here's my kid, here's my household, and how are we going to be affected based on the decisions I make?
So Kim, tell me what you got coming up next in Houston. You have an event, I hear?
Absolutely. So 1 week from today, July 25th at 2 p.m., we will be meeting virtually for our MOBBUnited event. And it is entitled The Wish List. And it is exactly that. It is a time of civil unrest in our country. It is a time where people are becoming aware of what's happening in our communities. The conversation is centered around civil injustices. The conversation is centered around talking more about that school to prison pipeline. And I feel like we are muted no more. And I feel like we have an opportunity to talk about some of those things that we wished when we had our children. So I'm bringing my wish list for my 2 boys, and I'm hoping that everyone who joins us in Houston is bringing their wish list. And we're going to reframe that, and we're going to really start to present information, and we're going to rekindle that fire that we have to see our boys strive and survive and grow and just be the awesome young men that we know they are.
Hallelujah. I love it. Yes. All of that. So July 25th, 2 p.m. virtually, online event. So everybody can come. It's a Saturday, right? Middle of the day. So everybody should be cool. That's awesome. And I love and as you guys see, there's so many things going on in the Houston chapter. So I think there's so many different ways you can plug in, and you can start with, what do you imagine our future should look like? What should education look like? What should policing look like in the school system? That is the issue. That is the issue. So I'm so excited that Kim, MOBBUnited is lucky to have you. And I am so grateful to learn. I learned so much about not only what we do as an organization, but just all the different ways and the different things that we can be doing here in Los Angeles as well. Kim, I can't thank you enough for your work that you do with the organization and telling us all about it and walking us all through it. And I hope that some of you guys out there are inspired by her to just do your small part, whatever your small part is. You know what they say, I'm an actor. They always say there's no small parts.
And I just want to leave you guys with one last thing. I was listening to a motivational speaker, and while I was preparing to get dressed in the morning, and she said, fault does not equate to responsibility. And so we know that the situation that our community is in is not our fault, but the responsibility is ours. And so I implore you to join us as we work to be the change.
That's a great way to end it. All right, y'all, that's Kim Alexander out of Houston, special needs at MOBBUnited.org. That is our episode of Mobbin in Your City. I am your host again, Nicki Micheaux. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Come back again next week.